So in this recording we're going to be talking about modernisation theory, and this is for AQA Sociology. So modernisation theory believes that society passes through stages, starting from a superstitious society to one based on science, and that once social development started, it followed an inevitable path of modernisation. Modernisation theory has been the dominant theory over the past 50 years. It tries to explain how some countries are changing today, as it assumes that development means capitalist development. It argues that communism is not the right way to development because poorer countries could develop through economic growth. However, the main problem with modernisation theory is that it's ethnocentric because it believes that the only route to development is to follow the USA. So now we're going to talk about the actual theorists of modernisation theory, and the main one is by Rostow, who has the takeoff theory. He believes that there are five main economic factors to development, and these are subsistence agriculture, preconditions for takeoff, takeoff itself, a drive to maturity, and mass consumption. And it's at the third stage of takeoff, which is when societies achieve momentum which ensures development. Modernisation theory by Rostow has been demonstrated correctly because he said that China and India were about to take off 60 years ago, and they have. However, you can criticise Rostow because even after huge injections of aid to third world countries, they're still not developed, and other modernisation theories argue that cultural factors are more important because they act as a barrier to development. So one cultural factor is demonstrated by Parsons, who argues that cultural factors are a barrier to success because he argues that third world countries are based on collectivism and ascribe status, and this prevents entrepreneurial spirit needed to drive industrial growth. And he argues that third world countries need to adopt meritocracy and universalism before they can develop. However, neo-modernisation theorist like Edwards argues that traditional cultures can bring about modernisation. For example, in China, they demand obedience, hard work, and sacrifice alongside authoritarian leaders. Moreover, Hosowitz argued that meritocratic education systems speed up the spread of Western values which are essential to the production of an efficient, motivated, and geographically mobile workforce. He believes that the focus should be on education through aid and Western intervention. However, you can criticise Hosowitz's view of education, especially by using the neoliberals' view that aid is wasteful as it creates dependency. Also, you could argue that education only benefits a small section of the population because educated elites monopolise top positions, which leads to corruption and shippening off aid money. Hosowitz also believed that urbanization was the way to develop a country. He believed that urbanization meant that it was easier to spread Western values in a lavish city, and that individuals are free from the constraints of rural areas. And he also believed that cities have a cultural effect on the rest of society, and that's why they were so important to development. However, the problem with urbanization is that it creates slums, inequality, and false needs like smoking. So overall, you could argue that modernisation still has influence over international organisations such as the World Bank and the United Nations, and also the fact that rich countries still offer aid demonstrates that it's still influential. Modernisation theory is also useful in demonstrating that communism is not the way to development. For example, China's economic growth was due to capitalism. However, neoliberals argued that it should be trade, not aid, and that there should be free markets and that governments are wasteful in the way they use aid. Also, the problem with modernisation theory is that all of the theorists originate from the Western world. For example, Galano said that they train you to be paralysed, then they sell you crutches. Also, modernisation theory takes a one-size-fits-all approach. Marxists would argue that it fails to recognise the domination by Western governments. And also, modernisation theory has social damage, such as pollution and child labour, but then you could argue that child labour also gives people a job. In conclusion, by the 1980s, modernisation theory had failed to explain development, so Booth developed the theory impasse. The problem with modernisation theory is it couldn't explain the failure of Rostow's takeoff, and postmodernists would argue that modernisation theory undermined the meta-narratives and that globalisation adds a new dimension to old theories like modernisation theory. And also, modernisation theory has been replaced by neoliberalism